The stars had always promised humanity greatness. For millennia, our ancestors gazed upward, dreaming of the day when we would finally reach beyond our pale blue dot and claim our place among the cosmic tapestry. What they never imagined was that the universe would come to us first, and that it would come with demands. Admiral Helena Cross stood on the observation deck of the UES Prometheus, humanity's flagship carrier, watching the swirling blues and greens of Earth rotate slowly beneath her. At 63 years old, she had given her entire adult life to the United Earth Navy. She had witnessed humanity's first tentative steps beyond the moon, the colonization of Mars, the establishment of mining operations in the asteroid belt, and the construction of the fleet that now stood as Earth's first and last line of defense. She had never imagined she would be the one to lead that fleet against an alien armada. "Admiral," Commander James Chen's voice cut through her reverie. "The alien vessels have entered lunar orbit. 147 ships confirmed." Helena turned from the viewport, her weathered face betraying nothing of the fear that coiled in her stomach like a living thing. Fear was a luxury she could not afford, not now, not when the eyes of 12 billion souls were fixed upon her and her fleet. "Their formation?" she asked. "Unchanged, ma'am. A crescent shape, with the largest vessel at the center. Our analysts believe that's their command ship." Helena nodded slowly. The alien fleet had appeared 3 days ago, materializing at the edge of the solar system in a burst of exotic radiation that had set off alarms in every observatory on Earth. They had moved with deliberate slowness, as if wanting to be seen, wanting humanity to understand the inevitability of their approach. And now they were here. "Has there been any response to our hails?" Helena asked. "Negative, Admiral. They've ignored all attempts at communication." Chen paused, his dark eyes reflecting the cold light of distant stars. "Until now." Helena's eyebrows rose fractionally. "They're responding?" "They're broadcasting, ma'am. All frequencies. Every language in our database, including some we don't recognize." Chen's jaw tightened. "They want everyone to hear this." "Put it on speakers." The voice that filled the observation deck was cold, inhuman, and yet somehow comprehensible in a way that transcended mere language. It was as if the words bypassed Helena's ears entirely and spoke directly to something primal within her mind. "Inhabitants of the third planet, we are the Kael'thari Dominion. We have observed your species for the span of 60 of your revolutions around your star. We have catalogued your wars, your cruelties, your endless capacity for violence. We have watched you spread from your world like a pestilence, contaminating the sacred void with your primitive vessels and your barbaric ambitions." Helena's hands curled into fists at her sides, but she remained silent. "The Galactic Accord, which has maintained peace among the civilized species for 300,000 of your years, has rendered its judgment. Humanity is deemed too dangerous, too aggressive, too unpredictable to be permitted continued existence as a spacefaring species. You will return to your homeworld. You will dismantle your fleet. You will surrender all technology capable of interstellar travel. And you will submit to the supervision of Dominion observers who will ensure your compliance." The voice paused, and when it continued, there was something almost like satisfaction in its tone. "These terms are not negotiable. They are not subject to discussion or debate. They are the will of the Accord, and they will be enforced. You have 12 of your hours to begin compliance. If you fail to do so, we will assume you have rejected the Accord's mercy, and we will take whatever measures are necessary to ensure the safety of the galaxy." The transmission ended, leaving behind a silence that seemed to press against Helena's eardrums like a physical weight. Commander Chen was the first to speak. "Admiral, what are your orders?" Helena stared at the viewport, at the distant specks of light that represented the alien fleet. 147 ships against humanity's 312. But the enemy vessels were larger, their technology unknown and almost certainly superior. The odds were not in humanity's favor. They had never been in humanity's favor. "Get me a secure channel to United Earth Command," she said quietly, "and summon all flag officers to the war room. We have preparations to make." Part 2. The Council of War. The war room of the Prometheus was a monument to human ingenuity and paranoia in equal measure. Buried deep within the carrier's reinforced hull, shielded by layer upon layer of composite armor and electronic countermeasures, it represented the beating heart of humanity's military might. 23 admirals and senior officers sat around the circular table, their faces illuminated by the holographic display that dominated the room's center. The display showed Earth, the Moon, and the disposition of both the human and alien fleets in real time. The human vessels were marked in blue, the alien ships glowed an ominous red. Helena stood at the head of the table, her back straight, her eyes sweeping across the assembled officers. These were the best humanity had to offer. Veterans of the Martian uprising, the Europa crisis, the asteroid belt conflicts. They had faced death before, but never like this. "You've all heard the broadcast," she began. "The Kael'thari Dominion has given us 12 hours to surrender our fleet, our technology, and our future. They want us to return to Earth and stay there forever, like obedient pets confined to a yard." Admiral, Vice Admiral Ricardo Santos spoke up, his Brazilian accent thick with barely contained emotion. "With respect, we don't know what we're dealing with here. Their ships, their weapons, their capabilities. We have no intelligence on any of it. Fighting them could be suicide." "And surrendering could be slavery," Admiral Yuki Tanaka countered from across the table. "Or worse. They spoke of ensuring the safety of the galaxy. How do we know they won't simply exterminate us once we've disarmed?" Helena raised a hand, silencing the murmurs that rippled through the room. "Both concerns are valid, but before we discuss tactics, I want to make one thing absolutely clear." She leaned forward, placing her palms flat on the table. "The decision of whether to fight or surrender is not ours to make. It belongs to the people of Earth and her colonies." She tapped a control on the table's surface, and the holographic display shifted to show a communication readout. "I spoke with Secretary General Okonkwo 20 minutes ago. The United Earth Council is in emergency session. They will vote within the hour." "And if they vote to surrender?" Admiral Chen Yi asked quietly. Helena met his eyes. "Then we stand down. We follow orders. We do our duty." She paused. "But if they vote to fight?" "Then we show these bastards what humanity is made of," Admiral Santos finished, a grim smile crossing his face. The hour passed like a century. Helena remained in the war room, watching the holographic display as the alien fleet maintained its position in lunar orbit. They hadn't moved, hadn't broadcast again. They were waiting, confident in the inevitability of humanity's compliance. She thought about that confidence, thought about what it must be like to be part of a civilization so old, so powerful, that the idea of resistance seemed laughable. The Kael'thari had spoken of a 300,000-year peace, 300 millennia of uncontested dominion over the galaxy. And in all that time, Helena suspected, no one had ever told them no. The communication panel chimed, and Secretary General Amara Okonkwo's face appeared on the screen. She was a small woman, barely 5 feet tall, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes that had seen too much sorrow and too much joy in her 82 years of life. "Admiral Cross," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment, "the Council has reached its decision." "We're ready to receive it, Madam Secretary." Okonkwo was silent for a moment, and Helena saw something flash in the old woman's eyes, something fierce, something proud, something quintessentially human. "The vote was unanimous, Admiral. Every nation, every colony, every representative of the human species has spoken with one voice." She straightened, and when she spoke again, her words carried the weight of 12 billion souls. "We will not surrender. We will not submit. We will not be confined to our cradle like children who have misbehaved. We are humanity, and we will meet this challenge as we have met every challenge in our history, with courage, with defiance, and with the unshakable conviction that our future belongs to us and us alone." Helena felt something stir in her chest, something she had thought long dead after decades of military service. It was hope, she realized. Hope and pride and a terrible, beautiful determination. "Understood, Madam Secretary. We will carry out the Council's will." "One more thing, Admiral." Okonkwo's expression softened slightly. "The Council discussed whether to send a reply to the Kael'thari, some grand speech about human rights and self-determination. We decided against it." "May I ask why?" "Because words are cheap, Admiral. Humanity has always spoken loudest through its actions." A ghost of a smile crossed the Secretary General's face. "Let our weapons be our answer. Let our silence and our fire speak for a species that will not be cowed." The communication ended, and Helena turned to face her officers. Every eye in the room was fixed on her, waiting. "You heard the Secretary General," she said. No response, no speeches, no declarations. She pulled up the tactical display with a sweep of her hand. In 11 hours, the Kael'thari deadline will expire. When it does, they will expect to see our ships powering down, our crews abandoning their posts, our species capitulating to their demands. Her voice hardened, became steel. "What they will see instead is the full fury of the United Earth Navy. We will answer their ultimatum not with words, but with fire. We will write our response in the burning hulls of their ships and the blood of any who dare to threaten our home." She looked around the table, meeting each officer's gaze in turn. "Does anyone have any objections?" Silence answered her. "Then let's get to work." Part 3. Preparations for Battle. The next 10 hours were a blur of activity throughout the human fleet. 312 ships of various sizes and capabilities, from the massive carriers like the Prometheus to the nimble destroyers and the heavily armed battlecruisers, were brought to full combat readiness. Captain Sarah Mitchell commanded the destroyer Defiant, a ship barely 200 meters long, crewed by 120 men and women who had volunteered for what everyone knew might be a one-way mission. As she walked through the corridors of her vessel, she saw fear in the eyes of her crew, but she also saw resolve. Captain, her executive officer, Lieutenant Commander David Park, fell into step beside her. All departments report ready for combat operations. Weapons are loaded, shields are at full power, engines are hot. "And the crew?" Park hesitated. "They're scared, Captain, but they're not going to run. I've never seen anything like it. Even the newest recruits are acting like veterans." Sarah nodded slowly. She understood what he meant. There was something in the air, something that transcended individual fear and reached towards something greater. Humanity had been given an ultimatum, and in that ultimatum, every person in the fleet had found a common cause. They would fight. They might die, but they would not kneel. "Gather the senior officers in the wardroom," she said. "I want to go over the battle plan one more time." On the Prometheus, Admiral Cross was conducting a final inspection of the carrier's fighter bays. The massive hangar decks held over 400 Valkyrie-class space superiority fighters, each one a compact package of destruction capable of engaging enemies many times its size. Commander Elena Rodriguez, the carrier's CAG, Commander Air Group, walked beside her, tablet in hand. "All pilots are briefed and ready, Admiral. We've loaded the fighters with the new Mark 7 torpedoes, the ones with the quantum tunneling warheads. If anything can punch through alien shields, those can." Helena examined one of the sleek fighters, running her hand along its smooth hull. "And if they can't?" Rodriguez's jaw set. "Then we'll find another way. That's what we do, isn't it? We adapt. We overcome. We find a way to win even when the odds say we should lose." Helena allowed herself a small smile. "You sound like a recruiting poster, Commander." "Maybe I do, but it's true." Rodriguez's voice softened. "My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days, before the United Earth was formed. About the wars, the famines, the times when it seemed like humanity would tear itself apart. But we didn't. We survived. We grew stronger. And now," she gestured toward the viewport, toward the distant stars, "now we're here, facing our greatest challenge yet, and I have to believe we'll survive this too." Helena looked at the young commander, barely 30, with her whole life ahead of her, and felt the weight of command settle more heavily on her shoulders than ever before. "We'll do everything in our power to make sure of it," she said. "That's all any of us can do." In the engineering section of the battlecruiser Iron Will, Chief Engineer Marcus Washington was performing miracles with warp coils and plasma conduits. The Iron Will was one of the oldest ships in the fleet, a veteran of countless engagements, and she showed her age in 1,000 small ways. But Marcus loved her like a living thing, and he would be damned if he let her fail now. "Martinez!" he bellowed across the engine room. "How are we looking on the main power coupling?" Ensign Sophia Martinez, barely out of the academy, looked up from her work with grease-stained hands and a fierce expression. "I've bypassed the secondary regulators and routed power directly to the weapons grid. We'll have 20% more firepower, but the engines might overheat if we push them too hard," Marcus finished. "I know, it's a calculated risk." "Chief," Martinez said hesitantly, "do you really think we can win this? I mean, look at their ships. They're enormous." Marcus set down his tools and walked over to the young ensign. He was a big man, with hands like industrial tools and a face that had seen more than its share of hard times. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Let me tell you something, Martinez. I've been in this Navy for 32 years. I've seen things that would curl your hair, battles that we had no business surviving, situations that should have killed us all. But here's the thing," he tapped the bulkhead beside him. "This ship and every ship in this fleet was built by human hands, designed by human minds, crewed by human hearts, and that means something." "What does it mean?" Marcus smiled grimly. "It means that we don't know how to give up. It means that when we're backed into a corner, we fight harder than ever. It means that whoever those aliens are, whatever they've conquered before, they've never faced anything like us." He picked up his tools again. Now get back to work. We've got a battle to win. Part 4. The Silent Response. The 12 hours expired at 0600 Greenwich Mean Time, with Earth's sun casting its first rays across the Atlantic Ocean. In homes and apartments, in offices and factories, in schools and hospitals, 12 billion people held their breath and watched their screens. The Kael-Thari fleet had positioned itself in a perfect arc facing Earth, its 147 ships arranged in a formation that spoke of supreme confidence. At the center of the arc, the command vessel, a massive construct nearly 10 kilometers long, drifted in the lunar shadow like a predator awaiting its prey. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Cross stood before the main view screen, watching the alien fleet. Beside her, Commander Chen monitored the communication channels. "The deadline has passed, Admiral," he reported. "The Kael-Thari are broadcasting again." "Let's hear it." The alien voice filled the bridge once more, and this time there was an edge of impatience in its tone. "Inhabitants of the third planet, the time allotted for your compliance has expired. We have detected no movement indicating surrender. We interpret this as defiance of the Galactic Accord's judgment." The voice paused, and when it continued, it dripped with condescension. "We understand that your species is young and impulsive. We are prepared to offer you a final opportunity to avoid destruction. You have 1 additional hour to begin dismantling your fleet. If you fail to do so, we will be forced to—" Helena made a cutting gesture, and Commander Chen killed the transmission. Silence fell over the bridge. Every officer, every crew member, every soul aboard the Prometheus turned to look at their admiral. Helena Cross took a deep breath. She thought of her father, a fisherman who had spent his life battling the sea and had taught her that the only true defeat was surrender. She thought of her mother, a teacher who had filled her with stories of human courage and resilience. She thought of her daughter, now grown and living on Mars with children of her own, who had sent her a message that morning containing just 3 words: "Make us proud." She would. "Commander Chen," she said, her voice steady and clear, "order all ships to combat positions. Weapons hot. Prepare to engage." Chen's fingers flew across his console. "All ships acknowledging, Admiral. Fleet is moving to attack formation." "And Commander?" "Yes, Admiral?" Helena's eyes never left the view screen. No response to the Kael-Thari. Not a word. Let our guns do the talking. Across the human fleet, the order rippled out like lightning through a summer storm. On 312 ships, klaxons sounded and crews rushed to battle stations. Weapons that had been held in readiness were finally unleashed from their safety locks. Engines that had been idling roared to full power. The human fleet began to move. On the Kael-Thari command vessel, Supreme Commander Vethkar watched the approaching human ships with something approximating confusion. In 3,000 years of service to the Dominion, he had overseen the subjugation of 47 species. Some had fought, of course, the young races always did, before they learned the futility of resistance. But none had ever attacked first. "What are they doing?" he demanded. "They cannot possibly believe they can defeat us." His subordinate, Fleet Master Kyrith, studied the tactical display with her compound eyes. "Perhaps they are attempting a show of force, Supreme Commander. A bluff to negotiate better terms." "They have no terms," Vethkar snapped. "They have the choice between submission and annihilation. There is no middle ground." He turned back to the view screen, where the human ships were now visible as individual points of light, growing steadily brighter. Attempt to hail them again. Perhaps they did not understand our message. At once, Supreme Commander. But the hail went unanswered. The human fleet continued its advance in perfect silence, offering no response to the increasingly frantic broadcasts from the Kael'thari command. Vethkar felt something unfamiliar stir in his ancient mind, something that, had he been human, he might have recognized as the first stirrings of unease. "They're not going to stop," Kyrith said quietly. "They're actually going to attack us." "Then they will die," Vethkar declared. "All ships prepare for combat. We will teach these primitives the price of defiance." Part 5. First Blood. The two fleets met at the edge of lunar orbit, and in the span of a single heartbeat, the battle began. The Kael'thari fired first. Massive energy beams that lanced out from their ships like the judgment of angry gods. The weapons were devastating, capable of cutting through the hulls of most species' vessels like a hot knife through butter. But humanity had not spent the past 3 days in idle terror. The fleet's engineers had worked around the clock, modifying shields and armor based on observations of the alien weapons. And while they couldn't stop the beams entirely, they could deflect them, at least partially. The destroyer Resolute took the first hit, a glancing blow that sheared away her forward sensor array but left her hull intact. Her captain, a young woman named Jessica Wang, didn't even flinch. "Return fire!" she ordered. "All weapons, target the nearest enemy vessel!" The Resolute's railguns spoke, hurling tungsten slugs at relativistic velocities toward the Kael'thari cruiser. The first salvo missed, but the second and third found their marks, slamming into the alien ship's shields with enough force to light up the void. "Direct hits!" the weapons officer shouted. "Their shields are holding, but they're flickering." "Keep firing," Wang commanded. "All ships, concentrate fire on single targets. We need to overwhelm them." Across the battlefield, the human fleet responded to her example. Ships coordinated their attacks, focusing multiple weapons on individual Kael'thari vessels. And slowly, impossibly, the enemy began to take damage. On the Prometheus, Admiral Cross watched the battle unfold on the tactical display. The human fleet was taking losses. 3 destroyers gone in the first 10 minutes, 2 more crippled, but they were giving as good as they got. 2 Kael'thari cruisers were already drifting, their shields shattered, their hulls breached. "Launch all fighters," she ordered. "Commander Rodriguez, you have tactical command of the air group." "Understood, Admiral. All pilots, form up on me. We're going hunting." 400 Valkyrie fighters screamed out of the Prometheus's launch bays, followed by hundreds more from the fleet's other carriers. They swept across the void like a swarm of angry wasps, too small and too fast for the Kael'thari's main batteries to track. Elena Rodriguez led the charge, her fighters' engines pushed to their limits as she dove toward the nearest enemy vessel. Behind her, her wingmen follow in perfect formation. "Torpedoes armed," her weapons officer reported. "Ready to fire on your command." "Wait for it," Elena breathed. "Wait, wait, now!" The Mark 7 torpedoes leaped from their launch tubes, their quantum-tunneling warheads phasing through the Kael'thari shields as if they weren't there. They detonated against the alien ship's hull, tearing massive holes in the superstructure. "Direct hit! They're losing atmosphere!" "Press the attack!" Elena shouted. "All fighters, target their weak points! Don't give them time to recover!" Supreme Commander Vethkar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. This was impossible. These primitives, with their crude weapons and their tiny ships, were actually hurting his fleet. How is this happening? He demanded. Their technology should be centuries behind ours. Their weapons are more effective than our projections suggested, Kyrith reported, her voice strained. And their pilots are aggressive. They're taking risks that no rational species would take. Then destroy them. All ships, increase firepower. I want every human vessel reduced to atoms. The Kael'thari fleet responded, their weapons fire intensifying. Human ships began to fall in greater numbers, destroyers, frigates, even 2 of the light cruisers. But still the humans came on, refusing to retreat, refusing to yield. And then something happened that Vethkar had never witnessed in all his millennia of service. The human battlecruiser Iron Will, crippled and burning, its engines gone and its weapons depleted, turned toward the nearest Kelthari capital ship and accelerated. "What is that vessel doing?" Vethkar asked. Kyrith's compound eyes widened. "It appears to be ramming us." "Impossible! No sentient species would sacrifice themselves so readily. It must be a malfunction. The Iron Will struck the Kael'thari dreadnought at full speed, her reinforced prow piercing the alien ship's hull like a spear. Both vessels disappeared in a blinding explosion that lit up the void for 1,000 kilometers in every direction. Silence fell over the Kael'thari bridge. They destroyed themselves," Kyrith whispered, "deliberately, to take our ship with them." For the first time in 3,000 years, Supreme Commander Vethkar felt something that might have been fear. Part 6. The Tide Turns. The destruction of the Kael'thari dreadnought was a turning point, not just tactically, but psychologically. Throughout the human fleet, the Iron Will's sacrifice was seen on sensors and screens, and it ignited something primal in every heart. They had proven it could be done. The enemy could be hurt. The enemy could be destroyed. And if the price was blood and fire, then humanity would pay that price gladly. Admiral Cross watched the battle unfold, her mind racing through tactical possibilities. The Kael'thari fleet was still superior in raw firepower, but the humans were faster, more agile, and, most importantly, more willing to take risks. "Signal all capital ships," she ordered. "Formation Phoenix. We're going to punch through their center." Commander Chen's face went pale. "Admiral, Formation Phoenix is designed for close-quarters combat. We'll be within point-blank range of their main batteries." "I know." Helena's voice was iron. "But we'll also be inside their minimum targeting range. They won't be able to hit us without hitting each other." "And if we lose ships in the approach?" Helena met his eyes. "Then we lose ships. But we'll take their command vessel, and without leadership, their fleet will fall apart." She paused. "It's our best chance, Commander. Maybe our only chance." Chen held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Aye, Admiral. Formation Phoenix it is." The human fleet reorganized in the midst of battle, a maneuver that would have been impossible for any species that valued self-preservation above all else. Destroyers and frigates formed a protective screen around the carriers and battlecruisers, absorbing hits that would have crippled the larger vessels. And then they charged. Captain Sarah Mitchell of the Defiant led the vanguard, her small destroyer dancing through the enemy fire with a grace that belied her ship's bulk. Around her, other destroyers fell, the Courage, the Indomitable, the Spirit of Earth, but the survivors pressed on. "Helm, give me everything you've got," Sarah shouted. "We need to punch a hole in their formation." "Captain, our shields are failing." "Then we don't need them anymore. Divert shield power to engines." The Defiant screamed through the gap between two Kilthari cruisers, her remaining weapons blazing. She was hit once, twice, a third time, but she kept going, trailing fire and debris, her crew holding on through sheer willpower. Behind her, the Prometheus and her sister carriers plowed through the opening she had created, their fighters swarming out to engage any enemy vessel that came too close. Supreme Commander Vethkar watched the human fleet tear through his formations with growing horror. This was not how space battles were supposed to be fought. There were rules, protocols, patterns of engagement that had governed interstellar warfare for hundreds of millennia. The humans, it seemed, had never learned those rules. "Fall back," he ordered. "All ships, fall back and regroup." "Supreme Commander, if we retreat now, we'll lose our formation advantage." "We've already lost it," Vethkar snapped. "These humans are insane. They fight like they have nothing to lose," Kyrith finished quietly. The Kealthari fleet began to pull back, but the humans gave them no respite. They pursued relentlessly, their weapons hammering at the retreating enemy vessels. More Kealthari ships fell, cruisers, frigates, even two of the mighty dreadnoughts. And still the humans came. On the Prometheus, Admiral Cross allowed herself a grim smile of satisfaction. The enemy was retreating. Not routing, not yet, but they were giving ground for the first time in the battle. "Admiral," Commander Chen reported, "we're receiving reports from across the fleet. 37 vessels lost or combat ineffective, another 62 with significant damage." Helena nodded. The casualties were heavy, heavier than she had hoped, though not as bad as she had feared. But they had hurt the enemy far more. "What's the status of the Kealthari command ship?" "Still intact, but isolated. Their fleet is pulling back to protect it, but that's opening gaps in their formation." Helena studied the tactical display, her mind working through the possibilities. The Kealthari command ship was the key. If they could destroy it, or even just damage it significantly, the enemy fleet would lose cohesion. Victory would be within reach. But reaching that command ship would require one final push, one final sacrifice. "Signal the fleet," she said slowly. "All units capable of sustained combat operations are to form up on the Prometheus. We're going to end this." Part 7. The Final Push. The human fleet assembled for its final assault. A battered but unbroken force of 173 vessels. They had lost nearly half their number in the hours of fighting, but those that remained were harder, sharper, more dangerous than ever. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, surrounded by her officers and crew. She looked around at their faces, tired, bloodied, but determined, and felt a surge of fierce pride. "Listen to me," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the ship through the internal communication system. "I know you're exhausted. I know you've lost friends and comrades today. I know some of you are wondering if any of this is worth it." She paused, letting the words sink in. "Let me tell you what's at stake. Behind us is Earth, our home, our families, everything we've ever known or loved. Those aliens came here to take that from us. They came to put a collar around humanity's neck and keep us penned on our own planet forever." Her voice hardened. "They chose wrong. They threatened the wrong species. And now they're going to learn what happens when you push humanity too far." She turned to face the view screen, where the Kealthari command ship loomed like a dark moon. "All ships, this is Admiral Cross. Attack pattern Omega. Weapons free. May God have mercy on our souls, because we're sure as hell not going to show any to them." The final assault was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. The human ships came from every direction, overwhelming the Kael'thari defenses through sheer audacity and aggression. Fighters wove between the massive enemy vessels, delivering torpedo strikes to weak points that the fleet's analysts had identified during the hours of battle. Capital ships traded devastating broadsides with the Kael'thari dreadnoughts, accepting horrific damage to deliver even more in return. Captain Sarah Mitchell led the Defiant, now missing half her hull and running on backup power, in a suicidal charge against a Kael'thari cruiser that was threatening the Prometheus's flank. She drove her crippled destroyer straight into the enemy vessel's weapons array, destroying both ships in a cataclysmic explosion. Commander Elena Rodriguez led her remaining fighters, just 47 out of the original 400, in a desperate strike against the command ship's shield generators. They succeeded in bringing down the forward shields, but Elena's fighter was hit by point defense fire and sent spinning into the void. "Commander Rodriguez, report!" The Prometheus's flight control called desperately. "Elena, can you hear me?" There was a long silence, and then Elena's voice crackled through the static. "Still here, more or less. Fighters dead, but life support is holding. Someone pick me up after we win this thing." On the Kael'thari command ship, Supreme Commander Vethkar watched his fleet crumble around him. More than half his vessels were destroyed or disabled. The rest were fighting for their lives against an enemy that simply refused to die. "This is impossible," he breathed. "They're primitives. They should have surrendered hours ago." "Perhaps," Kyrith said quietly. "We underestimated them." "Underestimated?" Vethkar turned on her, his compound eyes blazing. "They are insects. They have no right to challenge the Dominion." "And yet they are challenging us. And winning." Kyrith's voice was calm, almost resigned. "Supreme Commander, I recommend immediate withdrawal. If we retreat now, we can save the remaining ships and—" "Retreat?" Vethkar's voice rose to a shriek. "The Kael'thari Dominion does not retreat. We do not yield to lesser species. We—" He was interrupted by a massive impact that shook the entire command ship. Alarms blared and damage reports flooded in from every section. "What was that?" Vethkar demanded. Kyrith's eyes were fixed on the view screen, where a human battlecruiser was visible, closing rapidly. "They've breached our shields. They're preparing to board us." Part 8. Blood and Steel. The boarding action was led by Colonel James Blackwell, commanding the Prometheus's Marine Detachment. His men and women, the best ground fighters humanity had to offer, stormed through the breach in the Kael'thari command ship's hull with weapons blazing. "Move! Move! Move!" Blackwell shouted, his pulse rifle spitting fire at the alien defenders. "We need to reach the bridge and take out their leadership." The Kael'thari soldiers fought back with desperate intensity, but they were trained for shipboard security, not combat against an enemy that showed no fear. The human Marines advanced like an unstoppable tide, cutting down everything in their path. Private First Class Maria Santos, just 19 years old, barely out of training, found herself face to face with a Kael'thari warrior twice her size. The alien swung its energy blade at her head, and she ducked, rolling under the blow and coming up with her combat knife in hand. She drove the blade into the creature's thorax, feeling it puncture chitin and flesh. The Kael'thari screamed, a sound like tearing metal, and collapsed. Maria stood over its body, breathing hard, and realized that she wasn't afraid anymore. She was too angry to be afraid. "Contact left!" someone shouted, and she raised her rifle, firing on automatic. More Kael'thari fell. "Keep moving," Blackwell ordered. "The bridge is 3 levels up." On the Prometheus, Admiral Cross monitored the boarding action while simultaneously directing the final stages of the space battle. The Kelthari fleet was in complete disarray, their ships fleeing in all directions as the human vessels hunted them down. "Admiral, Commander Chen reported, the Marines have reached the command ship's bridge level. Colonel Blackwell is requesting permission to breach." Helena nodded. "Tell him to do it. End this." The door to the Kelthari bridge exploded inward, and Colonel Blackwell led the charge through the smoke and debris. His Marines spread out, their weapons covering every angle. Supreme Commander Vethkar stood at the center of the bridge, surrounded by his remaining officers. He was unarmed, his ceremonial robes torn and stained with the blood of his fallen warriors. But his eyes still blazed with defiance. "You think this changes anything?" he spat. "Even if you kill me, even if you destroy this fleet, the Dominion will send more. You cannot fight the entire galaxy." Blackwell lowered his rifle slightly, meeting the alien commander's gaze. "We just did." He raised his hand, and his Marines advanced, restraining the Kelthari officers and securing the bridge. The alien commander was taken into custody, his compound eyes never leaving Blackwell's face. "This isn't over," Vethkar hissed. "The Accord will not tolerate this. You have made yourselves enemies of every civilized species in the galaxy." Blackwell leaned in close. "Then they can get in line." He straightened up and keyed his communication device. "Prometheus, this is Blackwell. Bridge is secure. Enemy commander in custody. The command ship is ours." Part 9. The Aftermath. The battle was over. Of the 147 Kelthari vessels that had arrived at Earth, only 23 survived to flee the system. The rest were destroyed or captured, their crews dead or imprisoned. The Kelthari Dominion had suffered its first defeat in over 100,000 years. The human fleet had paid a terrible price. Of 312 ships, 162 were lost. Over 40,000 men and women had given their lives in the defense of Earth. But they had won. Admiral Helena Cross stood on the observation deck of the Prometheus, watching the rescue operations unfold. Shuttlecraft moved among the debris, searching for survivors and recovering the bodies of the fallen. Commander Chen approached her, tablet in hand. "Admiral, the final casualty reports are coming in. It's a lot of names." Helena took the tablet without looking at it. "I know. I'll read every one of them. I owe them that much." "Ma'am?" Chen hesitated. "What happens now?" Helena turned to face the stars. Stars that seemed different now, somehow. Less mysterious, less welcoming. They were still beautiful, but they held new dangers, new challenges. "Now we prepare," she said. "The Kelthari will be back. Maybe not in a year, maybe not in 10 years, but they'll come. And when they do, we'll be ready." "And the rest of the galaxy? The Accord?" Helena's lips curved in a small, hard smile. "Let them come too. We've proven today that humanity will not be caged, will not be silenced, will not be destroyed. Whatever the galaxy throws at us, we'll face it together." She paused. "And we'll make them regret every moment of it." Part 10. Echoes Across the Stars. In the weeks that followed the Battle of Earth, as it came to be known, humanity underwent a transformation. The divisions and conflicts that had plagued the species for millennia seemed suddenly petty, insignificant compared to the challenge they now faced. The United Earth Council met in emergency session and voted to establish a new military branch, the Terran Expeditionary Force, dedicated to taking the fight to any enemy who threatened human space. Recruitment centers were overwhelmed with volunteers, young and old alike, eager to defend their home and secure their future. On Mars, the colonial parliament voted unanimously to increase military production by 400%. On Europa and Titan, similar resolutions were passed. Humanity was arming itself for a war that might span generations. And across the galaxy, the other species of the Galactic Accord watched in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded. The Yithmari, a peaceful species of silicon-based life forms, had observed the Battle of Earth through long-range sensors. Their High Observer, a being of crystalline beauty named Chorus of Winds, addressed the Accord's emergency session. The humans fought against impossible odds and emerged victorious, it reported. They lost half their fleet, but destroyed or captured over 80% of the Dominion force. This is unprecedented. It is an aberration, the Kael'thari representative insisted. Our fleet was overconfident. It will not happen again. Perhaps, Chorus of Winds replied. But I have studied the humans' tactics, their strategies, their behavior in combat. They are unlike anything we have encountered before. They do not fight for territory or resources or abstract concepts of honor. They fight because they refuse to accept any alternative. The Accord chamber fell silent. They fight, Chorus of Winds continued, like a species that has spent its entire existence struggling against extinction. Every war they have ever waged has been for survival, against each other, against their environment, against the limitations of their own biology. They have been hardened by millennia of conflict, shaped by generations of adversity. The representative paused, its crystalline form shimmering. And I believe that we have made a terrible mistake in provoking them. On Earth, the celebrations had ended and the work had begun. Memorial services were held for the fallen, their names inscribed on monuments that would stand for eternity. But even in grief, humanity looked forward. Admiral Cross, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of the newly established Terran Expeditionary Force, stood before the United Earth Council. We won the first battle, she told them, but this war has just begun. The Kael'thari will return with a larger force. Other species might join them, hoping to crush us before we grow too strong. We need to be ready. What do you propose? Secretary General Okonkwo asked. First, we rebuild the fleet. Bigger, stronger, faster. The technologies we captured from the Kael'thari will help, but we need to go further. We need to push the boundaries of what's possible. She activated a holographic display, showing a star map. Second, we need allies. Not all species in this galaxy support the Accord's decision to contain us. Some of them are subjugated peoples, suffering under Dominion rule. Others are independent powers who fear the Kael'thari expansion. We need to reach out to them, form coalitions, build alliances. And third, Okonkwo prompted. Helena's expression hardened. Third, we take the offensive. We can't just wait for them to come to us. We need to strike at their bases, their supply lines, their industrial capacity. We need to make them fear us as much as we once feared them. The council members exchanged glances. What the Admiral was proposing was a fundamental shift in humanity's relationship with the galaxy, from defensive isolation to active engagement. Fleet Admiral Cross, Okonkwo said slowly, you're talking about interstellar war on a scale we've never imagined. Yes, Madam Secretary, I am. Helena met her gaze without flinching. Because the alternative is extinction. The Kael'thari have made it clear that they won't stop until we're either enslaved or destroyed. We can't negotiate with that. We can't appease it. We can only fight it." A long silence followed. Then, one by one, the council members began to nod. "Then we fight," Okonkwo declared, "with everything we have and everything we are. We fight until the galaxy understands that humanity will never yield, never surrender, never be broken." She stood, and the entire council rose with her. "Fleet Admiral Cross, you have your mandate. Prepare our species for war." Part 11. New Horizons. 3 years passed. The Terran Expeditionary Force grew from a concept into a reality, swelling from a handful of ships to a fleet that numbered in the thousands. New technologies, reverse-engineered from captured Kalthari vessels and developed through human ingenuity, gave humanity weapons and defenses that rivaled or exceeded those of the Dominion. The Prometheus remained the flagship, but she had been rebuilt, upgraded, transformed into a vessel that bore little resemblance to the ship that had fought at the Battle of Earth. Admiral Cross, now Supreme Commander of the TEF, directed operations from her familiar bridge. But she wasn't there now. She was on Earth, attending a ceremony that she had dreaded and anticipated in equal measure. The tomb of the unknown spacer had been erected in the heart of New Geneva, a monument to all those who had fallen in the defense of humanity. It was a simple structure, a pillar of black marble reaching toward the sky, inscribed with the names of every ship lost in the battle. Helena stood before it, surrounded by the families of the fallen and the veterans of that terrible day. Commander Chen was there, now an admiral himself. So was Elena Rodriguez, recovered from her injuries and promoted to command her own carrier group. And countless others, their faces scarred by war, but their eyes still bright with hope. "We gather here today," Helena said, her voice amplified to carry across the vast plaza, "to remember those who gave everything so that we might live. 40,000 men and women, parents and children, friends and lovers, heroes all, who faced impossible odds and chose to fight anyway." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces before her. Some would say that war is a failure, that every death in combat represents a failure of diplomacy, of understanding, of compassion, and perhaps that's true. But what they don't understand is that some fights cannot be avoided, some enemies cannot be reasoned with, some threats can only be met with force. Her voice hardened. "The Kalthari came to us with an ultimatum: surrender our future or be destroyed. They gave us no choice, no alternative, no path to peace that didn't involve the extinction of everything we are and everything we might become. And so we fought, we bled, we died." She turned to face the monument, touching its cold surface with one weathered hand. "But we won. We proved that humanity will not be caged, will not be silenced, will not be broken. We proved that the spirit of our species, that fierce, stubborn, indomitable spirit, is more powerful than any weapon, more enduring than any empire." She faced the crowd once more. "And now we carry their legacy forward. Every ship we build, every battle we fight, every star we claim, we do it in their name. We do it so that their sacrifice will have meaning. We do it because that's what they would have wanted." A moment of silence fell, profound and sacred. "Rest now, warriors of Earth. Your watch is over. We'll take it from here." Part 12. The Message. The Kalthari strike came without warning. A fleet of 300 ships, twice the size of the original force, appeared at the edge of the solar system and began advancing toward Earth, They had learned from their previous defeat, bringing overwhelming force to crush any resistance. But humanity had also learned. Admiral Chen commanded the defensive fleet, now numbering over 500 vessels. They met the Kael'thari at the orbit of Mars, and this time there was no hesitation. "All ships, attack formation Alpha 7, Chen ordered. "Let's show them what we've learned." The battle was brutal but brief. The human fleet, armed with weapons that exceeded Kael'thari technology, and crewed by veterans who had trained for this moment for 3 years, tore the enemy armada apart. Within 4 hours, it was over. 243 Kael'thari ships destroyed, the rest in full retreat. Human losses, 17 vessels. It wasn't even close. Supreme Commander Vethkar, who had been a prisoner of humanity for 3 years, watched the battle reports from his cell with growing disbelief. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "We brought twice the force. We upgraded our weapons. You underestimated us," a voice said behind him. Vethkar turned to see Admiral Cross standing in the doorway of his cell. She looked older than she had 3 years ago, the weight of command visible in the lines of her face. But her eyes were still the same, hard as diamond, burning with determination. "You came here to gloat?" Vethkar asked. "No." Helena stepped into the cell. "I came here with a message, for you and for your masters. The Dominion will never negotiate with you. You are primitives, insects." Helena smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "That's interesting, because about an hour ago, we received a communication from the Galactic Accord. It seems that several member species are reconsidering their position on humanity. The Yithmari, the Corvin, the Delphonic Collective, they're all interested in opening diplomatic channels." Vethkar's compound eyes widened. "Impossible! The Accord is beginning to fracture," Helena finished. "Your precious alliance is crumbling, Vethkar. Your species has dominated the galaxy through fear for 300,000 years. But fear is a fragile foundation. Push too hard and it breaks." She leaned closer. "We've been in contact with resistance movements on a dozen Dominion-controlled worlds. Oppressed species who have been waiting for someone to show them that the Kael'thari can be beaten. We showed them, and now they're rising up." Vethkar's face twisted with rage. "You're destroying the peace. You're bringing chaos to a galaxy that has known order for millennia." "Your peace was built on the bones of countless species," Helena replied coldly. "Your order was nothing but tyranny wrapped in bureaucracy. We're not destroying anything that deserves to exist." She straightened. "This is the message, Vethkar. Tell your masters that humanity is coming. Tell them that every species they've enslaved, every world they've conquered, every people they've oppressed, we're going to liberate them all. Tell them that the age of the Dominion is over." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "And tell them that we haven't forgotten what they tried to do to us. That debt will be paid." The door closed behind her, leaving Vethkar alone with his thoughts and his fear. Part 13. The Long March. The next 2 decades were marked by constant war. Humanity, fighting alongside a growing coalition of allied species, pushed the Kael'thari Dominion back sector by sector, star by star. It was not easy. The Dominion was vast, its resources seemingly limitless, and for every victory the coalition won, there were setbacks and defeats. But humanity had learned the most important lesson of all: How to endure. Admiral Cross, now in her 80s, remained the strategic mastermind behind the Coalition's campaigns. She had become a legend, not just among humans, but across the galaxy. Species who had never seen Earth knew her name. Children born on worlds light years from Sol grew up hearing stories of the human woman who had defied the Dominion and won. She never married, never had children of her own. The fleet was her family, the war her purpose, and when her health began to fail, she refused to step down. "I'll rest when it's over," she told the doctors, who urged her to retire. "Until then, there's work to do." The final battle came at the Kael'thari homeworld of Vethkara, a planet of ancient spires and vast cities that had served as the seat of the Dominion's power for 300,000 years. The Coalition fleet, over 10,000 ships representing 73 species, surrounded the planet. At their head was the Prometheus, now a veteran of countless engagements, her hull scarred but unbowed. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge one last time, looking out at the planet that had once ruled the galaxy. "This is it," she said quietly. "The heart of the Dominion. Everything we've fought for comes down to this moment." Admiral Chen, gray-haired now but still sharp, stood beside her. "The Kael'thari government is requesting terms for surrender. What should we tell them?" Helena was silent for a long moment. She thought of all the years of war, all the lives lost, all the sacrifices made. She thought of the 40,000 who had died at the Battle of Earth so long ago. She thought of the countless other casualties, human and allied alike, who had given everything for this moment. And she thought of the ultimatum that had started it all, the demand for surrender, the insistence that humanity submit or be destroyed. "Tell them this," she said finally. "Unconditional surrender. Their fleets will be dismantled. Their leaders will face justice for their crimes. Their empire will be dissolved. And every species they've subjugated will be given the freedom to determine their own future." "And if they refuse?" Helena's eyes hardened. "Then we'll do what we've always done. We'll fight." The Kael'thari surrendered. The war was over. Epilogue. The Legacy. Fleet Admiral Helena Cross died peacefully in her sleep 3 months after the armistice was signed. She was 87 years old, and she had spent nearly her entire life in service to humanity. The funeral was the largest in human history. Dignitaries from 100 species attended. Veterans of the Long War came from every corner of the galaxy. And ordinary people, billions of them, on Earth and every human colony, watched as her body was laid to rest in the tomb of the unknown spacer, alongside the heroes of that first battle so many years ago. Secretary General Chen Yi, no relation to Admiral Chen, the grandson of an immigrant from Shanghai and a descendant of farmers, delivered the eulogy. "Helena Cross never sought glory," he said. "She never wanted fame or power or adulation. All she wanted was to protect her people, to ensure that humanity would survive and thrive, free from the tyranny that threatened to extinguish us." He paused, looking out at the vast crowd. She gave everything to that cause. Her youth, her health, her chance at a normal life. And because of her sacrifice, and the sacrifices of so many others, we stand here today as free people, citizens of a galaxy where humanity is respected, feared, and admired in equal measure. He stepped back from the podium, and a moment of silence fell. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a voice began to sing. It was an old song, from the earliest days of human spaceflight. A song about leaving home, facing the unknown, and never giving up, no matter how dark the night. Other voices joined in, hundreds, then thousands, then millions. The song spread across the plaza, across the city, across the world, carried by speakers and transmitters to every human settlement in the galaxy. And on ships and stations light years from Earth, the song was heard and taken up by crew members of every species. Humans and Yithmari, Corvin and Delphanic, dozens of others, all singing together, united in their grief and their gratitude. Helena Cross was gone. But what she had built, what all of humanity had built, would endure forever. Final words. The stars had always promised humanity greatness. For millennia, our ancestors gazed upward, dreaming of the day when we would finally reach beyond our pale blue dot and claim our place among the cosmic tapestry. The universe had tried to deny us that dream. It had sent its finest warriors, its most advanced technologies, its most ancient civilizations to crush us, to contain us, to reduce us to a footnote in galactic history. It had failed. Not because humanity was stronger than its enemies, though in the end we proved to be. Not because we were smarter or more technologically advanced, though we learned and adapted and grew. We succeeded because of something simpler, something that the ancient species of the galaxy had forgotten in their millennia of peaceful dominion. We never gave up. When they warned us to stand down, we responded with silence and fire. When they sent their fleets to destroy us, we met them with courage and determination. When they pushed us to the brink of extinction, we pushed back harder. And in the end, we didn't just survive, we thrived. We built an interstellar civilization that would endure for tens of thousands of years. We became the protectors of the weak, the champions of the oppressed, the beacon of hope for species across the galaxy who had once been told that resistance was futile. We proved them wrong. That is humanity's legacy. That is what we are and what we will always be. A species that refuses to kneel, refuses to submit, refuses to accept any limitation on what we might become. The stars are ours now, and we will never let them go. This story is dedicated to all those who dare to dream of the stars, and to all those who refuse to accept impossible as an answer. May we always have the courage to stand up, speak out, and fight for what we believe in. Per aspera ad astra, through hardship to the stars. The end.